Assalamu alaikum students. I'm here with the new lecture of BS English semester 4. The name of the course is Introduction to Literature Part 4 and the subheading is History of English Literature Part 2, which is mainly concerned with literary movements. Course code is ENG 205. Today we will talk about the movement structuralism, and 1960 was the year when this movement got its origin. Structuralism is a method of interpreting and analyzing such things as language, literature, and society, which focuses on contrasting ideas or elements of structure and attempts to show how they relate to the whole structure. Students, your main focus would be on the interpretation as well as analysis of the things like language, literature, and society through a method which is structuralism. And afterwards, you will focus on the contrasting ideas or elements of the structure, and finally, you will show how these things are related to the whole structure. 1950s and 60s were the year when structuralism got its popularity not only in European countries but also in American literary theory and criticism. And Ferdinand de Saussure, who is the main and integral philosopher of structuralism, who said that language is basically a system of signs. Any sign is comprised on signifier and signified. So when someone says the word tree, the sound he or she makes is the signifier, and the concept of a tree is signified. The word, spoken word, any gesture which you are going to make, that is a signifier. And the image, as well as a concept, which is the person who is listener, your listener, who is getting that particular concept or idea, that is signified. In literary theory, structuralist criticism relates literary text to a larger structure, which may be a particular genre, a range of intertextual connections, a model of a universal narrative structure, or a system of recurrent patterns or motifs. You may also say that structuralism is a mode of knowledge of nature and human life that is interested in relationships rather than individual objects, or alternatively, where objects are defined by the set of relationships of which they are part and not by the qualities possessed by them taken in isolation. All the qualities which are taken in isolation, those qualities are not at all the consideration of structuralism. All those qualities which are interrelated with the whole system, with the whole structure of society, those are the major part or major concern of structuralism. How Peter Barry defined structuralism. According to him, the essence of structuralism is the belief that things cannot be understood in isolation. They have to be seen in the context of the larger structure they are part of. All the things around us or in society are not at all able to be understood in isolation. We have to make belief that all these things are the part of major or larger structure, and afterwards that particular structure is able to convey some meaning to us. The structures are those imposed by our way of perceiving the world and organizing experience rather than objective entities already existing in the external world. By this, it can be said that meanings or significance is not that kind of core or essence inside things. Rather, meaning is always outside. So, your main concern is that the meaning is always present outside the thing, outside the core or the essence. That is the main structure, that is the larger structure. Meaning is always an attribute of things by human mind, not contained within them. There are some features of structuralism. Number one is the structuralism attempts to analyze world as a production of ideas. That the world is based on some ideas which were produced by the creator, and afterwards this world is going to be uh, seen as basically the production of ideas. It assumes that the world has a logical pattern. For example, you may use the word advertisements. Advertisement are showing what the things which are going to be important for the people as well as significant for the people, and they have some logical pattern behind it. They want to convey something to the to audience or to people or to the viewers. Number 3 point is there is death of the subject, that is the individual is in structural analysis is dead. That the individual, what does an individual want to say, that is not at all important. Individual is not important, but what he is conveying, what is he saying, that is important. So far as structuralism is concerned, it analyzes the major portion of the thing which is going to be spoken, which is going to be conveyed, but the individual is dead all the time. For the clearer understanding, we must go towards the background of this movement. First, it was originated in 1950s in France, and basically it was related to the works of anthropologist Claude Levi-Strauss, whose time period is from 1857 to 1913, and the literary critic Roland Barthes, whose time period is 1915 to 1980. Both these writers, one was anthropologist who was expert in cultural studies, Levi Strauss, and then literary critic Roland Barthes. These two writers, philosophers, theorists, as well as critics were the main source of generating structuralism in France. Structuralism was imported to Britain in 1970s and attained fame as well as notoriety. As you all know that whenever a new idea, a new policy or a new movement is going to be introduced by the people, some people are able to understand it directly, and definitely they some are in favor of it and some are against it. It is a natural fact, and it first emerged in the field of linguistics, but afterwards it was expanded to other areas of studies like literature, art, and music as well. What is a theoretical perspective? Structuralism is an ambiguous term that refers to different schools of thought in different contexts. First of all, we will take humanities and social sciences into consideration. And according to structuralist mindset, humanities and social sciences were named as sociology, and Emile Durkheim based his sociological concept on structure and function, and from his work emerged the sociological approach of structural functionalism. Emile Durkheim is basically the most important philosopher or theorist who introduced sociology as well as sociological background for structural functionalism. Then, apart from Durkheim's use of the term structure, the semiological concept of Ferdinand de Saussure became fundamental for structuralism. Or you may see also semiotics became the main uh, and fundamental aspect. Saussure conceived language and society as a system of relations that, according to him, language alone can't be flourished. It needs society, it needs speakers, it needs learners. Same is the case, society can't flourish without any expression. For expression, society needs language. So these two things are going to be interrelated. His linguistic approach was also a refutation of evolutionary linguistics. Throughout the 1940s and 50s, existentialism, an important, significant movement, was propounded by Jean-Paul Sartre, and it was the dominant European intellectual movement. Structuralism rose to prominence in France in the wake of existentialism, where existence precedes essence was the main concept, and in particular 1960s it was at its climax. The initial popularity of structuralism in France led to its spread across the globe. By the early 1960s, structuralism as a movement was coming into its own, and some believed that it offered a single, unified approach to human life that would embrace all disciplines. Meaning, we started from humanities and social sciences, which converted into one single subject, sociology. Afterward, sociological approach gave birth to structural functionalism, and then we came towards semiological concept of Saussure, and uh, he rejected evolutionary linguistics. Afterwards, we came towards existentialism. These three different approaches, different schools of thought, set the theoretical perspective for structuralism. Another important linguist who is from Russia is Roman Jakobson. He was also one of the pivotal figure in the adaptation of structural analysis to discipline beyond linguistics, including philosophy, anthropology, and literary theory. Jacobson was of the view that analysis should not at all be related to or limited to linguistics only, but it must include philosophy, anthropology, and literary theory. Claude Levi Strauss had a deeper influence of Jacobson on his views or mind, by whose work the term structuralism first appeared in reference to social sciences. Levi Strauss' work in turn gave rise to the structuralist movement in France, and it was also named as French structuralism, influencing the thinking of other writers, most of whom disavowed themselves as being a part of this movement. This movement, as well as thought, included such writers as Louis Althusser, psychoanalyst Jacques Lacan, as well as the structural Marxism of Nikos Poulantzas. Next point related to Roland Barthes and Jacques Derrida. These are also French writers, theorists, philosophers who focused on how structuralism could be applied to literature. Their main concern, although in the start, was language, but afterwards they strived to know about the application of structuralism into literature. Accordingly, the so called Gang of Four. Who are these four people? Levi Strauss, Lacan, Barthes, and Michel Foucault. These are called as Gang of Four. They named as the main philosophers of structuralism. That's why the term Gang of Four was originated for them. What are the basics of structuralism? As you know that structuralism emerged from linguistics and language theories. Afterwards, it was applied to literature, and it analyzes the underlying principles and components of literature and culture to establish a relationship between them. With the help of this established connection, critics draw conclusions about different works of an individual and the system or society which has produced that work. Students, be focused that the established connection which the critics has draw out, from which the critics got the conclusion that different works of an individual and the society, or different works of the individual and the system which has produced that work, is the main concern. That we have to take into consideration the individual, his work, and then society. All these things are working together. Structuralists perceive this world in the form of structures, and they think whatever we do can be expressed in language. According to Saussure, it can be expressed through spoken words, it can be expressed through written words, it can be expressed through gestures. All these things are the part of language. Language has symbols which are not confined to oral and written communication only. It scaffolds that understanding things in isolation is difficult. They must be examined, they must be studied, or they must be analyzed in broader context of structures they have emerged from. Everything in society which is surviving alone, it is nothing. It doesn't have any value. For giving its value, for giving a sort of study, for giving a sort of analysis, we have to consider the structure, the main structure for which the thing part of it, because everything is basically the part of main structure or a larger structure. So the larger structure, basic concern of structuralism. Structuralism in literature is a constant movement that doesn't allow interpretation of literary work in an isolated context for understanding larger structures which hold them. You may quote the example of John Donne's poem Good Morrow, in which for structural analysis you may highlight this poem, or it's up to you if you want to consider another poem for structure analysis, it is also good on your part. Any genre and example relate to each other rather as a phrase spoken in English language as a structure with all its rules, its conventions, and so on. Whatever the genre is under consideration, whatever the example is under consideration, everything, every genre and every example is all the time related to each other, whether it is as a phrase spoken in English, or it is spoken in English language, or it is as a structure with all its rules or conventions. So you have to go back towards the 12th century, in which good morrow, which stands for good morning, was written. And it was not a good thing for the lovers because they had to part in the morning time, right? Because it was the convention, it was a tradition that night time was for those people, and dawn time was a time when they have to uh, leave each other. On structural analysis, one has to go further away from the text and abstract questions of genre, history, and philosophy. That you have to create a context for clearer understanding, for particular understanding of that poem as on structural analysis basis. What is the basic belief? Structuralism relies in basic belief that human activities are not natural but are structured. You have to understand what the activities are, and as you know that all these activities can't happen in isolation, because if in isolation these things are going to happen, or these things are getting existence, they are not at all valuable as compared to the structured activities, because all the activities are related to structure, larger structure. Structuralism in Literature by Robert Scholes, Structuralism and Semiotics by Terence Hawkes, Working with Structuralism by David Lodge and Colin McCabe convey the fundamental belief in structuralism. These books are very comprehensive, easy to understand, as well as they are able to convey all the basics, um, ideas about structuralism. Fundamental belief in scientific terms can be referred to an interrelationship between rules and units. What are the rules? Rules basically is a way to assemble the units. What are the units? Units are important surface phenomena. And you may find all these things in fairy tales. These rules become grammatical structures or forms, and units become words when they come to the language. Grammar forms and words are different from language to language, but the structure remains the same. Structure makes the meaning. In Urdu, which is our national language, we may understand Urdu by our surroundings, and whenever we have to write Urdu in a good way, we need grammar. In the same way, English is our foreign language, and with the help of grammatical rules, all the people or the Pakistani speakers are able to learn language in a very good way. So the structure, main structure would be same. How can we exemplify structuralism, or how can we understand that structure makes meaning? For this we have to highlight some fairy tales like Sleeping Beauty, Cinderella, Snow White. All these are the units, these are the protagonists. In these protagonists of these fairy tales are units: princesses, god fairy, antagonist like stepmother, evil characters, witches are rules. These narratives present princesses and as innocents and victimized, and princes marry them in the end. These are going to leave us towards happy ending all the time. Both rules and units may differ. The underlying structure of the plot is the same in all fairy tales. Protagonists may differ, unit may differ, rule may differ, but the plot will be same. Here, fundamental belief explains that it's a human mind that generates a core structure which is responsible for organizing units and roles into a comprehensive, meaningful system, and there is no room for sense perception when it comes to generating structures. I'm again repeating, that's a human mind that generates a code structure which is responsible for organizing units and roles. That Where is the structure lies? Structure lies in human mind, which is generating a sort of structure. Which structure? Which is based on the organization of units as well as rules, किसमें, into a comprehensive और meaningful system, ताकि जो आपके व्यूवर्स ऑडियंस या लर्नर्स हैं वो उसको परसीव करें, उसको अंडरस्टैंड करें. एंड देयर इज नो रूम फॉर सेंस परसेप्शन व्हेन इट कम्स टू generating structures. 19th century attempted to decrease the complexities of individual experiences to some underlying structures. These experiences are universal and have its roots in Aristotelian classic beliefs. What are the main properties of structuralism? There are three main properties to understand structuralism. Number one is wholeness, number two, transformation, number three, self regulation. What is wholeness? It refers to holistic function of system, that system must be complete in itself. What is transformation? It refers to the evolution of a system as it must not be static. Transformation, change, meaning things are going to be transformed by the passage of time. Language is also going to be transformed by the passage of time, by the spoken of different people. And self-regulation refers to the constancy of basic structure. Transformation shows that system is not static. Self-regulation means that system basic structure is constant. Basic structure is static. What are the experiences and patterns of structuralism? It presented language as a dynamic unity that plays a vital role in consisting meanings in the context. Meaning is outside the things. Meaning is not present in the core or essence, whereas it is present in outside. Experiences are easy to observe if we try to follow those patterns. For example, American buildings in 1850s industrialization having the same architectural features. In 1850s, industrialization got its origin or its peak so far as buildings or construction was concerned, but their features were same. Although the buildings have distinct physical structures, but the construction follows the same underlying principles. They exhibit the artistic composition of American urban style of 18th century and then structural activity to analyze or discover the composition or structural system.